Today I am bringing you my August reading wrap up, on time for once. Are you proud of me? Because I'm really proud of myself. I'm filming this on the 1st of September, only 2 weeks after I filmed my July wrap up, so it feels a bit weird to be filming another wrap up this quickly, but I'm very excited to talk about some books that I read in August. Two of the books that I finished in August I've already talked about in my July wrap up, so I'll leave that linked if you're interested, but there's 7 books that I have to review today, a mix of different genres, a mix of different ratings. I had a 2-star book in August, and then I had quite a lot of solid 4-star reads, which is obviously great. I think I am going to start with the 2-star review just to get it out of the way. I don't want to talk about this book. I mean, I do. One of my most anticipated releases for this year was The Fallen and the Kiss of Dusk by Carissa Broadbent. This is the latest release in the Crowns of Nyaxia world. I was so excited for this book. I picked it up on release day. I actually had an arc through NetGalley, but by the time I got round to picking it up, it was release day, so I just read the finished copy through KU. I had a cold at the time. I was feeling very sorry for myself, and I thought this is going to cheer me right up, and it didn't. I don't know whether it was just my brain at the time that I read it or whether my expectations were too high. I think it's because it didn't really deliver what I wanted. I feel like this was quite different to her other books. If you don't know, this is the sequel to The Songbird and the Heart of Stone, but the first book in this world is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. There's 2 duologies, and then there's also a bunch of standalones that are set within this world. It's a fantasy romance series involving vampires. What I loved about Songbird and the Heart of Stone was the main character's personal journey. She has some religious trauma that she's having to process, and the romance was such a great slow burn, and then the ending was so intense, and I was expecting that intensity to continue into the start of the sequel, but that didn't happen in my opinion. I felt like there was just convenience after convenience. Things were getting resolved too quickly, and then the plot involves this quest that I did not care about at all. All of this other stuff was happening involving the gods of this world that I thought was so much more interesting, and we weren't focusing on that. I felt like the pacing throughout this book was a bit of a mess. Even the romance didn't save this for me. I found the romance quite boring. I felt like stuff was manufactured to try and create romantic tension, and it just wasn't really working. The ending was okay, but by that point I just didn't care, and I'm still so upset about it. I think I am going to read the next duology, which I think the first book in that duology comes out next year, but I'm going to wait until it's a completed duology, then potentially reread the series up until that point, and just hope that maybe I enjoy it more a second time around. That was the only book that I read in August that I didn't like, so we're going to move on to some 4-star reads, starting with Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. This is the author who wrote Big Little Lies, a book I read years ago. I read it around the time that the TV show came out, so it was way before I even had heard of BookTube. I feel like Liane Moriarty is most well known for writing domestic dramas, and Here One Moment isn't really that. It's more of a contemporary lit fic. It's had a lot of comparisons to The Measure by Nikki Erlich, which, if you don't know, is one of my favourite books of all time, and I can understand the comparison. However, I think these are quite different in the way that they approach this similar theme. So The Measure takes the concept of what would happen if everyone worldwide knew how long they were going to live for. It takes that concept and it explores it with a lot of depth and detail, whereas I feel like Here One Moment, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it, but I feel like it's more personal. It's more about the characters and how they react individually. We're basically following these people who are on this plane going from Tasmania to Sydney. During the flight, a woman stands up, walks down the aisle, pointing to people, seemingly predicting when they're going to die or how old they're going to be when they die and how they're going to die. So obviously this causes a big panic, especially when some of her predictions seemingly come true within the first few weeks after this flight. Yeah, I really enjoyed following the individual characters. There were some characters that I was more invested in than others, and it did feel very much like a character-driven story, but I thought the character work was really well done. I did feel like it was a bit too long, especially the beginning to me felt like quite a slog to get through. You get the perspective of the woman who makes these predictions, which I wasn't expecting, and I didn't feel that invested in her life story, but by the end of the book I appreciated how everything came together. It didn't go in the direction that I was expecting. I think if this had been a little bit shorter in the beginning, then it would have been 5 stars. I did listen to this one on audio and would recommend it. The audiobook narrators were fantastic. There's 2 narrators, I think, that do the different voices, and I felt like they really brought the characters to life. Next up, I read a sequel. I read Emberclaw by L.R. Lamb, which is the sequel to Dragonfall. This is a fantasy duology which is marketed as adult. I would say it's probably in between YA and adult, but it's basically set in this world where, as you can see, there are dragons, or there used to be dragons. At some point in the past, dragons and humans lived together in harmony. However, humans betrayed dragons, stole their magic, and banished them to another realm. At the start of the first book, a human accidentally brings the last male dragon through into the human world, and the plot goes from there. I really liked this. I gave it 4 stars. I think I gave the first book a 4.5. I don't think it's perfect, but the world in this to me just feels so immersive. It's a queer norm world. The main character, one of the main characters, is non-binary, and I really like the way that this explores gender. Within this society, it's quite rude to assume a person's pronouns without them telling you, and I really liked the way that all of that was handled. This particular book, this sequel, has a magic school setting, which I don't think was used quite to its full potential, but it was still fun, and like I said, I liked the characters in this. It's not a romantasy, but there is a romance between the 2 main characters, and I thought that was well handled in the first book. With this book, I didn't feel the chemistry as much, but that could be because it's been so long since I read the first book. If I'd been able to, I would have gone straight into the second book, but this didn't come out until earlier this year, so couldn't do that, but I had a good time with it, and I would recommend this duology. I think it's very underrated. Next up we have Monstrillio by Gerardo Simona Cordova. This is literary horror, which is a subgenre of horror that tends to really work for me, and I really liked this. I gave it 4 stars. It was a solid 4 stars for most of the book, and then I finished it and I kept thinking about it, so now I'm questioning, is it a 4.5? Do I even give it a 5? I don't know, I haven't decided, but we're calling it a 4 stars for now. This is grief horror. It starts by following this woman called Magos, and literally on the first page, this woman and her husband learn that their son has passed away. Their son was, I think, around 11, and he was born with only 1 lung, so he wasn't expected to live as long as he did, but it obviously devastates this couple, and it's about how these different characters process grief. Magos decides to cut out a piece of her son's lung, and then someone tells her a story that convinces her she could grow this lung into something else, and it grows into Monstrillio, this monster. You do follow a few different characters throughout this story. My favourite perspective was the last character. You follow the characters over a long period of time, and while it is a book about grief, it's also a book about queerness. Most of the characters in this are queer, and there is an element, a theme around feeling like people aren't accepting you for your true self, feeling like you're having to conform and hide parts of yourself. It's also a book about unconditional love, and it's a book about family, and it's very much about these characters, and I thought as a character study it was very well done. I liked the writing, I thought it flowed very well, except there were these little time jumps which would sometimes take me out of the story. Really liked how this had a few different settings. It takes place in New York, Mexico City, and Berlin, I think. I would read more books by this author, and I would recommend it. It has a different cover in the UK, which I'll put on the screen so you can see. I'm really glad I picked up this cover when I was in New York, because I much prefer the colours on this one. Next up we have One of the Good Guys by Araminta Hall, which is a thriller, although I will say the thriller elements weren't my favourite part of the book. This, I feel, leans more towards a domestic thriller, which isn't my favourite type of thriller. However, I do love a good thriller audiobook, and the narrators did a fantastic job with this. It's a full cast, there's multimedia, like newspaper articles, interviews, even text message chains and phone calls and stuff like that, and it really comes to life on the audiobook, so would recommend the audiobook book for this. It doesn't have the best average rating on Goodreads, and I think it's because the story itself is a bit on the nose in the way that it explores its themes, and I don't have a problem with that because I don't mind it when an author has a clear message that they want to get across, and I felt like the message was loud and clear in this book. So in this, we are following a guy called Cole who has recently separated from his wife. He's moved to the coast. He's starting afresh. He meets this woman who lives not far from him, and they strike up this friendship which may develop into something more. At the same time as this, there's these two women who are doing a charity walk across the south coast to raise money for a domestic abuse charity, and that walk takes them through this village or this small community. That's all I'm going to say on the plot. This is very character driven. I would say it leans more towards a domestic thriller. Immediately you have this feeling, this sinking feeling that something isn't quite right, and I really liked the way that the narrators brought the characters to life. I do think some of the dialogue was a little bit clunky, and being inside the main characters' minds, sometimes they would think stuff in a very direct way. So in that sense, it felt like a popcorn thriller, but also towards the end, it felt like it was challenging you to think and to question whether these characters had made the right decisions. I think the author presented a situation to spark a conversation, and you're not necessarily meant to side with any character. I mean, maybe you are. I think this was quite well done, but I also understand the criticisms from people saying that they found it a bit too on the nose and a bit too obvious. Next up, we have Accomplice to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mehra, which is the third but not final book in the Assistant to the Villain series. I thought this was a trilogy, and it's not. There's a fourth book coming out next year, but I didn't realise until I was about 70% of the way through Accomplice to the Villain, and I was really annoyed because as much as I've enjoyed this series, I'm ready for it to be over. I don't think the plot needs to be stretched out that much, but if you don't know, this is, I would call it a cosy romantasy. It's marketed as a romantasy because it has romance and fantasy, but it's not that serious. When you think of a typical romantasy, you might think dark and intense. This is not that at all. It follows a woman called Evie who accepts a job working for the villain of this world. It's a very generic medieval fantasy world. There's not a lot of world building, which is usually not my kind of thing, but I really like the romance in this. It's a slow burn, which you wouldn't expect. A lot of the popular books on TikTok are popular because they're spicy, and this, I would say, is not really that spicy. On a scale of 1 to 5 chili peppers, I would say it's like a 1. If you want a book that's light-hearted and funny and that doesn't take itself too seriously, then I would recommend checking out the first book to see if the humour is going to work for you, because I think it has quite a dry sense of humour, which from the reviews that I've seen, some people just don't get on with it, which is completely fair because humour is so subjective, but I really like the characters in this. There's, I was going to say talking frog, he doesn't talk, he holds up signs that he writes on with chalk, and his name is Kingsley, and he is very funny. So yeah, I enjoyed this third book, but I'm hoping book 4 is the final book. If this was an episodic series where we were following the same characters, but there was a different plot in each book, then I think that would work better. The actual plot, which involves this prophecy, I just don't really care that much about, but I love the characters. Then the final book that I have to talk about is The New Age of Sexism by Laura Bates. The tagline for this is How the AI Revolution is Reinventing Misogyny. So this is non-fiction. I listened to this on audio and then I had to go out and get myself a physical copy because I really liked it. Enjoy is not the right word because it's not really a book that you read for enjoyment. It made me feel very anxious actually, but it does reference quite a few statistics which I wanted to be able to refer back to. I'm not going to go through everything in this book, but some of the chapters that it touches on. The first chapter talks about deepfakes. It also talks about the metaverse and how a man and a woman could walk down the street and have completely different experiences, and the same is true online. It also talks about cyber brothels, about about image-based sexual abuse, AI girlfriends, and designing AI. How if you train AI based on existing data sets that have biases, then AI is also going to learn those biases, and it gives some examples on where that has happened. This is fascinating. I would really recommend this to pretty much everyone. It's been out in the UK for a while, but I know that it comes out in the US in September. It might actually be out by the time this video goes live. It's only a short book, it's less than 300 pages. I'm pretty sure the audiobook was about 5 hours long. It's narrated by Laura Bates, who, if you don't know, is a feminist activist and campaigner, and I really want to read more of her books. I'm pretty sure a friend recommended me one of her books a few years ago, and I kept meaning to get around to it, but now I need to make it a priority. That does bring me to the end of this wrap up, so thank you for watching. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Let me know your favourite book of last month, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye!